The white CTO mocked the black boy during his tech talk until the boy raised his hand and wrote code that made the room stand and applaud. "You lost, son. The basketball tryouts are down the hall." The room chuckled, a smug echo bouncing off polished glass and steel. Elijah stood silent. His hoodie looked out of place among button-downs and lanyards, but it wasn't the fabric that made them stare, it was his skin. It was the second day of the Future Code Youth Tech Symposium, held at Delos HQ in Palo Alto. The room was packed with engineers, venture capitalists, reporters, and some of the most intimidating minds in Silicon Valley. Among them, towering over the polished stage like he owned the algorithm for the universe itself, was Matthew Crane, Delos CTO and self-proclaimed gatekeeper of innovation. Crane had just wrapped up a speech dripping in bravado and buzzwords. AI won't just change the world, he'd declared. It will choose who's worthy of building it. And when Elijah 14, skinny, wearing second-hand sneakers raised his hand during Q&A, the man couldn't resist. "You got a question about TikTok, champ?" Crane had grinned. Some laughed. Some looked away. A few older black engineers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Elijah lowered his hand, but only for a second. Then, quiet as a whisper, he said, "I think your clustering model's inefficient." Crane blinked. The room hushed. "I'm sorry," the CTO asked, his voice dripping sarcasm. "You're using an outdated cost function for unsupervised learning," Elijah said, eyes fixed not on the man's face but on the code displayed behind him. "I can write a better version, if you let me." The silence cracked. It was bold. Stupid, maybe. Who interrupts a tech titan to challenge his algorithm? But there was something in the way Elijah said it, like he wasn't bluffing. Like he didn't just believe it. He knew it. Crane narrowed his eyes. "You want to rewrite my code? Live?" Elijah nodded. The CTO snorted. "All right then. Let's be entertained." The auditorium lights dimmed slightly as a second laptop was wheeled onto the stage. Someone handed Elijah a mic and stood back, as if distancing themselves from an inevitable failure. Elijah sat, cracked his knuckles, and leaned in. For a moment, nothing happened. The cursor blinked. Then his fingers began to move. It wasn't Flashino showboating, no unnecessary flair. Just clear, fast, purpose-driven keystrokes. Line after line of Python flowed. Neural network initialization, dataset optimization, dynamic clustering using a custom cost function that adapted in real time to outliers. He wasn't just coding, was communicating in a language most people in the room only thought they understood. The big screen behind him filled with graphs and comparisons. Memory efficiency, runtime, error rate, each one updated in real time, showing his version outperforming Crane's original by double digits. A murmur started in the back. It grew. Someone whispered, "Wait, this is legit." Crane leaned forward. His smugness had curdled into disbelief. "Who the hell taught you this?" Elijah shrugged without looking up. "No one. I read a lot. And my mom cleans offices at MIT. Sometimes I wait for her. They leave whiteboards up." Laughter again, but this time from a different corner of the room. A man in a gray suit clapped once, then again, and then others joined. The applause spread, rising like static until the whole auditorium stood. Elijah stopped typing. He didn't smile. He didn't look proud. He looked tired. Like this was only the first battle in a war he never asked to fight. Later, reporters would scramble for his name. Startups would beg for a meeting. Crane would be forced to acknowledge the potential he'd nearly dismissed. But in that moment, standing quietly beside the same man who had belittled him, Elijah just whispered, "You said AI will choose who's worthy. Maybe it already has." That was how it began. And it would only get more complicated from there. When Elijah stepped off the stage, the applause still rang in his ears, but he didn't look back. He didn't shake hands. He didn't linger. While others saw a victory, he felt the weight of something else, eyes that hadn't seen him before now tracking his every move, suddenly hungry. In the hallway, his mom was waiting. She'd taken a half-day off work just to be there. Her uniform still smelled faintly of bleach and old printer paper. "Elijah?" she asked quietly. Her voice carried a worry that no applause could drown out. He nodded, still clutching the USB stick they'd let him use. "They laughed at me," he said. She looked down the hallway, then reached up and touched his cheek. "They saw what they expected, until you showed them what they couldn't ignore." Elijah didn't respond. Back inside the auditorium, The tech elite buzzed with excitement. Crane was surrounded by a small cluster of executives, whispering with a tension that hadn't been there before. For the first time in years, someone had knocked the smug off his face. One of Delos' VPs, a sharp-tongued woman named Priya Mahajan, turned to him. "What are you going to do with the kid?" "Nothing," Crane said, too quickly. "He's a fluke. He doesn't even have credentials." Neither did Zuckerberg at 14. Crane's jaw flexed. Priya leaned in closer. "You know damn well that was no fluke. That code was elegant." A silence passed between them. Crane hated moments like this, moments when someone else had power over the narrative. The headlines were already being written. A child prodigy, a racial undertone they couldn't PR away, and a company that looked like it had almost silenced genius because it didn't come in the right packaging. By the time Elijah got back to the hotel, his inbox had exploded. Emails from VCs, DMs from recruiters, subject lines with words like partnership, equity, mentorship, and in one surreal case, dinner with Musk? He didn't reply to any of them. Instead, he opened a simple text message from his older cousin Jalen. "I saw what you did. I'm proud of you. But be careful. That kind of power scares people." Elijah stared at the screen for a long time. That night, while the tech world buzzed with talk of the black boy who broke Delos, Elijah coded quietly by the hotel window, headphones on, hoodie up, fingers flying across the keyboard. Not chasing claps, not chasing interviews, just building something that would last. The next morning, a black Escalade pulled up outside their hotel. Elijah's mother stepped outside to greet the driver. "Delos," he said, holding out an envelope. "Invitation only." Elijah didn't want to go. His mom made him. When they arrived, it wasn't to the glittering HQ from the symposium, but to a private floor, far from reporters and fanfare. Crane was waiting, sleeves rolled up, eyes bloodshot but alert. "Sit," he said. Elijah sat. "No cameras," Crane added, looking at his mother. "Off the record." Elijah's mother folded her arms. "You don't talk to my son without me here." Crane smirked. "Fair." He pulled up a chair, sat directly across from Elijah, and leaned in. "You embarrassed me yesterday." Elijah stared at him. "I don't like being embarrassed." Still, Elijah didn't speak. "But you're good. Maybe even remarkable." Crane took out a contract. "We want to offer you a mentorship program. Private. Intensive. You'll work with our lead engineers. No social media, no interviews. You focus on code. We'll handle the rest." His mother picked up the document. Her eyes narrowed. "And what do you get?" Crane shrugged. His potential doesn't need to be politicized. There it was. He wasn't just trying to own Elijah's talent. He wanted to sanitize it. Make the world forget that this brilliance had come from someone they wouldn't have picked. Someone the system wasn't built for. "I need time," Elijah said. Crane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. But if you're smart, you'll understand how rare this is. We don't hand out second chances." Elijah stood. "Maybe you don't." As they left, Crane's voice followed them. "You want to be a martyr, that's your choice. Just remember, this world doesn't reward rebels. It eats them." Elijah said nothing. But inside, something hardened. 3 days later, the headlines shifted. Delos launches youth initiative with promising young minds. Crane welcomes fresh talent as company eyes the future. Innovation, not division, says Delos CTO after symposium shakeup. Not one headline mentioned Elijah by name. He became a ghost in his own story. That night, Priya Mahajan called. "I know what they're doing," she said. "They're erasing you." Elijah sat on the floor of his room, back against the bed, eyes tired. "Let them." "No," she said sharply. "That's not how this ends." He didn't know whether to trust her. She was part of that world. Sleek suit, soft power, and always playing angles. But then she said something that surprised him. "When I was your age, I wrote an entire compression engine. My teacher gave me a D because he thought I'd copied it." Elijah looked up. "No one gave me a mic," she said. "So I'm giving one to you." She sent him a file. A TEDx application. Private, under her name, fast-tracked. "Tell your story," she said. "Your way. Unfiltered." The video went live 3 weeks later. Elijah stood on stage, not at Delos, but at a smaller hall in Oakland. No fancy lights. No suits. Just folding chairs, families, students, and a camera. He didn't talk about code. He talked about silence. About how it felt to walk into rooms where no one expected him to belong. About his mom cleaning offices where ideas worth billions were born, and how no one ever asked her what she dreamed of. Then he opened a terminal and showed the audience what he'd built since. A neural translator. Free, open source, trained on underrepresented dialects and languages. Designed for classrooms, hospitals, communities like his that tech had ignored. No investor pitch. No exit plan. Just tools that lifted others like him. The video went viral. And this time, they couldn't erase him. The comments flooded in. This kid is the future. Representation matters. He's not a fluke. He's a mirror. Elijah was no longer the boy who embarrassed Crane. He was the boy who reminded the world that genius doesn't wear one face. And he wasn't done yet. Elijah wasn't ready for what happened next. His talk, honest, emotional, raw, did more than just go viral. It lit a fire. Within days, students from Detroit, Atlanta, Nairobi, Sao Paulo began sending him videos of their own projects. Lines of code scribbled in notebooks, apps built on borrowed laptops, clips of them watching his speech and saying, "If he can do it, maybe I can too." A week later, MIT invited him to speak. Not as a curiosity, not as a sideshow, but as an innovator. Professors quoted his neural translator tool in lectures. A research group in Ghana used his open-source code to begin digitizing endangered dialects. A small school in New Orleans named a lab after him. The Elijah effect. They started calling it kids of color entering tech with pride, not apology. But it wasn't all applause. Delos was quiet. Too quiet. In the background, they filed for a provisional patent suspiciously similar to Elijah's real-time clustering model. The same one he'd written on their stage. Without his name. At first, he thought he was being paranoid. Until a journalist, Rebecca Cho, reached out. "I've seen the filings," she said over a crackly Zoom call. "They're using your code, Elijah. And they're scrubbing the attribution." Elijah sat frozen. "But I open-sourced it." "Yes, but they're claiming modifications. Claiming it as a commercial derivative. You didn't protect the core algorithm." His stomach turned. "So what do I do?" he asked. Rebecca leaned in. "You burn the whole damn lie down." The article dropped 3 days later. Front page of Wired, cross-posted by The Verge, TechCrunch, even The Guardian. From token to thread. How Delos is trying to erase a black teen prodigy's breakthrough. It included email leaks, internal memos, a voice recording of a Delos strategy meeting where a senior legal advisor said, "We just need to delay him long enough to file first." The tech world exploded. Crane was called to testify before a congressional ethics board on IP theft and discrimination. Sponsors pulled out. A Delos stock dip wiped out $8 billion overnight. Protesters picketed outside their HQ with signs reading, "Let Elijah build," and "Innovation has no skin color." Elijah watched it all unfold from his bedroom floor, laptop open, a fan oscillating in the corner. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. It didn't feel like justice yet. Because he knew the system didn't break for him, it bent, just for a moment. And it would snap back fast. That night, a message came through his inbox. No subject. No sender. Just a single sentence. "This isn't over, kid." His mom wanted to call the police. Instead, Elijah posted a blog entry titled, "This is what they do when you don't stay quiet." It was viewed 6 million times in 48 hours. By now, he had a team of volunteers, law students, coders, educators, and community organizers who believed in him not as a symbol, but as a leader. Together, they launched Frame, a tech nonprofit focused on helping marginalized kids build their own tools and defend them. Free licensing help, open-source mentorship, legal workshops, public speaking courses. He turned the very thing they tried to take from him into a shield for others. But still, the pressure didn't stop. One day, as he walked out of a coding camp in Richmond, a black car followed him for 5 blocks. At another event, a speaker whispered, "You're making enemies in the wrong places, kid." And then, the offer came. A tech firm, not Delos, offered him $10 million to step down from Frame and pursue personal growth and education. Another sent an even slicker deal, a full scholarship to Stanford, equity in a new AI startup, and a non-compete clause buried on page 16. He turned them all down. Because Elijah had learned something no one expected him to: the power of refusing. Refusing to sell out. Refusing to shrink. Refusing to believe he had to earn his place in rooms where brilliance already lived in his skin. Then, one evening in Oakland, it happened. A small tech summit invited him to give a keynote. Intimate. Local. Mostly kids. Nothing flashy. He almost said no. He was tired. Bone tired. But his mom told him, go. Not for them, for the one kid in the room who needs to hear you. He wore jeans. A plain t-shirt. No stage crew. No handlers. He started to speak. But halfway through, the doors opened. Crane walked in. Yes, that Crane. The CTO. Or former CTO now. Delos had pushed him out, but he hadn't disappeared. And now, he was sitting in the back row. Arms folded. Watching. Elijah faltered for just a second. Then he breathed. Reset. And kept going. He told the story again, not of revenge, but of roots. Of growing up watching his mom rest her swollen feet after scrubbing conference room floors. Of being told by teachers again and again to slow down, to stop showing off, to be realistic. Of the day a man tried to reduce him to a joke in front of hundreds. And of the moment he realized he wasn't asking for a seat at the table anymore. He was building a new one. Crane didn't clap when it ended. He just stood, walked up, and, in front of everyone, said, "You ruined me." Elijah stared at him, unblinking. "You mean I exposed you?" he said. Crane nodded slowly. "Same thing." Then, almost soft, "You're dangerous." Elijah stepped closer. "No, I'm visible." He turned to the audience. And that's what scares them. A beat. And then the room erupted. Not with polite applause, but with cheers. Real, bone-deep, foot-stomping celebration. Because they saw what Crane couldn't. Not a threat. Not a fluke. A beginning. Elijah didn't look back. Because he wasn't chasing them anymore. He was too busy leading. Months passed. Elijah's name no longer trailed behind the title of the black boy who embarrassed Delos. He had become something else now, an architect. Not just of code, but of movement. Frame had grown from a scrappy collective into a national force. Chapters opened in Chicago, Miami, Accra, Johannesburg. Hackathons were held in converted gyms and community centers. Kids who'd never touched a laptop were learning neural nets and blockchain basics before their 16th birthday. He never took a cent from venture capital. Never gave a keynote at Davos. Never wore a tie. But he was everywhere. Tech magazines began to call it the Elijah Standard, a new way of measuring innovation, not by profit margins or IPO valuations, but by impact and access. But even as Elijah grew into his power, part of him stayed grounded in a single truth. You can win 100 battles and still feel like the war never ends. The threats became quieter, more sophisticated. Suddenly, several Frame donors had their bank accounts flagged for suspicious activity. A few former partners began pulling out, whispering about being pressured by legacy networks. And one night, Elijah got a letter. No signature. Just a sentence typed on crisp, cream paper. "You've had your moment. Now sit down before we make you." He folded it and slid it into the drawer with the others. Then he kept building. But even Elijah couldn't have predicted what would happen next. It started with a story. A small one. A 12-year-old girl in Mississippi, Layla Thomas, used Frame's curriculum to create an app that helped her local church deliver groceries to elders in their neighborhood. It went viral. Not because of tech journalists, but because of TikTok. The video showed her walking door to door, bags in hand, with a glowing smile and an app she'd designed herself. She said she learned from some guy named Elijah. The caption read, "Suddenly, the floodgates opened again." But this time, it wasn't about Elijah. It was about everyone else. Kids across the country were no longer just inspired by him. They were surpassing him, inventing tools he hadn't imagined, teaching one another, lifting each other. A 10-year-old in Nairobi created a solar-powered tablet that translated sign language into audio. A girl in Oakland built a machine learning model to identify asthma triggers in low-income housing. And they all carried the same seed, Frame. One night, Elijah stood in his bedroom, walls lined with dry erase boards, wires trailing across the floor, the faint hum of servers in the closet. He stared at a message pinned on his corkboard. "You're dangerous." He crossed it out with a red marker. Underneath, he wrote, "We are inevitable." 1 year later, something strange happened. Delos collapsed. Not because of a scandal, not because of Elijah, but because they became irrelevant. The new generation didn't trust them, didn't use them, didn't need them. Investors pulled out. Users migrated. Talent stopped applying. Their final tweet was curt and unceremonious. Delos Technologies will be shutting down operations effective immediately. No one mourned. Elijah didn't celebrate either. He just nodded and turned back to his work. That week, he visited a middle school in Baltimore. It was underfunded. Cracked walls. Old chalkboards. Half the kids shared laptops. He walked into the computer lab and saw a dozen brown faces staring up at him, not in awe, but with expectation. As if saying, "What's next?" He smiled. "Let's break something," he said. They laughed and dove in. Later that night, sitting alone in a quiet corner of a cafe, Elijah opened his journal. It was something he rarely did, now writing by hand. But there were thoughts he didn't want to store in the cloud. Ideas that needed to be felt, not digitized. He scribbled, "When I was a kid, I thought code was the thing that would save me. Now I know it was just the door. What saved me was refusing to stop knocking, even when they never opened it. What saved me was being seen by the people who needed me to stay visible. What saved me was understanding that my story didn't belong to them. It belonged to everyone still writing theirs." He closed the journal, and for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to breathe. Not because the world was fixed, but because he knew he had changed it. Not by becoming the next billionaire, but by making sure brilliance never had to beg again. The next morning, his mom woke to find a sticky note on the fridge. "Gone to the lab, teaching the kids how to write poetry in Python." She smiled, shook her head, and poured her coffee. Somewhere across the city, Elijah sat beside a 13-year-old girl debugging her app that used AI to detect hate speech in school chat logs. She leaned over and asked, "Did anyone ever help you when you were starting out?" He thought for a moment, then smiled. "Not really." She frowned. "Then how'd you do it?" He looked at her. Softly, "I refused to disappear." She grinned. And together, they kept coding. Because the revolution wasn't in the spotlight. It was in the classroom, in the basement labs, in the communities where no one thought brilliance could bloom. But now it did. Everywhere. Because one boy raised his hand and changed everything. The end. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.